Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to the companions in these ayat. And remember the ayat, the majority of the ayat from the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah was about the Israelites and how they dealt with Musa alayhi salam, and the mindset that they had, the mindset of not quite understanding what submission is. They argued with Musa alayhi salam. They argued with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They refused to follow, and the punishment came upon them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded us with many instances that happened before. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a subject of abrogation. Abrogation meaning changing something that came down. And that abrogation could be an abrogation to be by the text itself taken away, or an abrogation by the rule. The rule will be taken away, but the verse will stay. And some other verse will come and give a different rule than the first rule. And as we read in the Quran, we'll read all of them. And sometimes they are separated in the Quran, is not one follow the other. But we read all of them. So we actually read in ayat that it's not obligation for us to follow because it's been abrogated, changed by other ayat. Now the new ruling is the one that stands. The old ruling no longer is used. So that is naskh. So you imagine the companion listening to something like this. So what would naturally come to them? A question. Why is this happening? They did not ask, by the way. They didn't ask, but that would come to mind. Okay, that why the new ayat will come? Why didn't the new ayat come first, and we did not need the first one? So there is a wisdom there that is difficult to understand. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها." That is, whatever ayah that we abrogate, we get an ayah better than it, okay, or similar to it. That's it. ألم تعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير? Don't you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable over everything? So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to do that, we would have done it from the beginning. Okay. ألم تعلم أن الله له ملك السماوات والأرض? Don't you know that Allah has the ownership of the heavens and the earth? وما لكم من دون الله من ولي ولا نصير? And you have no helper at all, no aid whatsoever beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the attitude. The attitude, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing so because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing so. That's all there is to it. Okay, we can talk about maybe a wisdom behind this here and there, but it is not something to ask. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمْ تُرِيدُونَ أَن تَسْأَلُوا رَسُولَكُمْ كَمَا سُئِلَ مُوسَى مِن قَبْلِ? Or do you want to ask your messenger like Musa alayhi salam was asked? That's a huge statement here now, a question, a huge question. They're not going to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam the questions that the Israelites asked. The Israelites were asked to, they were told to slaughter a cow. So the question is, what is it that you want us to slaughter? What's a cow? Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them the how old it is, what color is it is, and so forth, right? So that was a question not in its place, and there is no reason to ask for this question at all, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you what to do and commanded you to do something, and that's it. And it's clear what it is. And it doesn't make sense, so you keep asking. It is just for the purpose of what? Arguing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here there is something, could be, you could say it makes sense that you can ask. Right? Even then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't do that. Okay? Don't do that. Or you're going to ask like what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, like what Musa alayhi salam was asked, how he was asked. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks now about something so huge. وَمَنْ يَتَبَدَّلِ الْكُفْرَ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ. The one who will exchange iman and take kufr certainly went away from the path. We're talking kufr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about kufr here. You know, about something that it needs a question to be asked, needs an explanation. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you don't do that. Okay? You don't question any of this. Okay? But there are the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, at one time, the companions asked, before a battle, Ya Rasulullah, why don't you make for us use a tree to hang our sword on it, just like they do. As the Arabs used to, before the battle, go around a big tree and hang their swords over the branches of the tree. So you see the tree all full of swords. That's how they initiate the beginning of the war and so forth. So the companion asked a question, just, why don't we have this just like them, a tree like what they have? Like continue with this custom. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, are you asking me like the Israelites when they asked Musa alayhi salam, why don't you make a god for us just like they have gods? Or idol for us just like they have idols? Now this is they're not asking for an idol. They're asking just for a tree, but this is just like we'd be asking for an idol. Because why do you want this tree? Are you trying to get a good omen from it? Are you trying to follow steps of the kuffar in somehow here? Well, what is the purpose of all of this? Okay, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have taken it in an innocent way and maybe corrected them in a subtle way. But no, took it immediately to kufr. Okay? Similar here. Something that could be asked, but then, no, be careful. Go in these kind of questions. Did the companion ask other questions? They did. But the questions they asked is not about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. It's about what they want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tell them. Because they wanted to obey. They wanted to commands, so they are eager to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And certain things they had questions about because they don't know how to handle it as Muslims. Maybe there is certain ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, now that they are Muslims, they have to handle it differently. So in that kind of sense, it was okay to ask, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even recorded their questions in the Quran. Okay? So يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. They ask you about the crescent. Because the crescents, it was used for the beginning of the month and the end of the month to know for a calendar. And they ask, Ya Rasulullah, is it okay to do this? Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to deal with the crescent in a different way? يسألوك عن الأهلة قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج. Tell them it is for mawaqit, for time, to calculate time for people, and hajj, meaning to know when hajj is going to start and so forth. Okay? They have their relationship with their wives. Okay? The time of menses, what do? They have a question about this, because they don't want to do anything that displeases Allah. If there's something special, they have certain customers and things like that and so forth. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala record their question. Does not say don't ask. No, record their question. Okay, يسألونك عن المحيض. They ask you about the woman's menses. قل هو أذى فاعتزلوا النساء في المحيض. And say it is a harm. So stay away from women during that period, during that time. Okay, and then when they get to purification, then you go back and so forth. So yes, you can ask. Okay, but it depends on why they ask. They want to ask because you want to, for something that doesn't make sense to them, or for the purpose of arguing, or they're asking because they want eager to know more so they could follow the way of Rasulullah sallallahu, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That is a different. And the companions used to say, there is nothing more beloved to us than, in a way of expression, and a Bedouin would come to the masjid and ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam questions. Because we're told not to ask. We are afraid to ask. We're holding back. We don't want to ask. Because they open up many things and so forth. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sometimes when he is asked, he would not answer. And sometimes a companion does not know this, or would be a Bedouin, or someone who is like at the time of Hajj over Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Someone came and says, Ya Rasulullah, is Hajj every year? Do we have to go to Hajj every year? And Rasulullah ﷺ did not answer. Then after a while, Ya Rasulullah, do we have, is obligation, do we go to Hajj every year? Rasulullah ﷺ did not answer. 3 times. Then Rasulullah ﷺ said, when I don't respond to you, do not keep asking. If I say something, it could become an obligation upon you, and you're making difficult on yourself. So when I do not answer you, you stay away. Do not keep asking. Okay. So within this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us the way of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way of surrendering to Allah. Okay, the intellect, it is used in the Quran to understand the Quran, not to criticize the word of Allah. It is to understand it so we can follow it. And if it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it is from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then the answer that the companions and the Muslims would give is سمعنا وأطعنا. We hear and we obey. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Go ahead. Go ahead, أخونا.
Shall I go?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah, today we continued with Surah Al-Baqarah and we did 3 ayahs, ayah number 106 to 108. The first 2 ayahs refer to some fiqhi